Hello everybody, hope you're having a good day today. Today we're going to be making Tic-Tac-Toe in Java. I plan to make this a three-part series where today we're going to basically create the logic of Tic-Tac-Toe and create Tic-Tac-Toe on the command line, so through the terminal or the CMD if you're on Windows. And the next video I plan to make a GUI and hopefully we'll make some sort of an AI, so when two people play, the other person will be basically the computer and it'll make moves and you have to make moves against it pretty much. So if you don't know what Tic-Tac-Toe is, so basically it's like a game where there's like two kind of pieces, I guess. Usually common ones are X and O, and usually O goes first, but it doesn't really matter. So let's say O goes first, so they put an O here, and let's say X, let me change the color here, and X went here. So the goal is to try to get 3 in a row, either on the column, either on the columns or the rows, or diagonally. So for example, if let me switch back to green so it actually makes sense. So let's say it was something like this, and blue didn't know what he was doing, so he played this. Then the circle or O could just play this, and then this would be a win. This game also has a tie, so if there's no 3 in a row and all the places are filled, then that's a tie. So this is what we're going to be making in the Java today, and I hope you're excited, and let's get started. Alright, so let's get started. So first things first, I'm using VS Code here, but you can use any other editor IDE that you want for Java. So I've created a folder. I just created a random folder, it doesn't really matter, and I just created a class called tic-tac-toe.java. And I just basically have a boilerplate set up, so I just have the class, obviously, a constructor, a main method, and a run method, which will basically be the main the game loop. So it'll basically control everything that happens in our game. So it'll control asking the user for where they want to put pieces. It'll control basically control the entire game is what I'm trying to say. So it'll control displaying the board, making the move, or calling a method that will make the move, or deciding if the game's over yet or not. So that kind of stuff. And then we have a setup board, which is at the start, or basically we're gonna have a feature where after the game's over, you can the game asks you to if you want to play again, if you want to continue playing a new game, then this is when we'll call that. So it basically initializes a clean board. Okay, that's pretty much what it does. And then we have another method which is display updated board, and this is just it's gonna have an updated board, and it's gonna display that every time in this method, and it's basically going to have as it says, the most updated version of the board. So it'll draw the X's and O's in the right places. And then we have a method that returns a string, and it's called change turns. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna have changing turns. So we don't want player 2 to move twice in a row, or player 1 to move twice in a row. So we're going to have a method that will control, and it'll give us a string or telling us whose turn it is. Then we'll have a void method that doesn't return anything, and it's going to be the make move method, which is going to get a parameter of move. And this is basically the person that's moving, right? And we're going to this is going to determine if what the person entered, the rows and the columns. So we're going to have the person enter a row and a column where they want to put their piece, and it's going to determine if that is if that's a proper move or not, and if it is, and we're just going to place it there. Then we have a method called winner, and this is basically you're going to return a string, and it's going to determine who is the winner by checking that diagonal checks and the rows and columns checks to see if there's 3 in a row, and we're going to return the name of the player that won. And here is going to be the ask to play again method, and this is just responsible for asking again until the user inputs yes or no. So that's the basic boilerplate. So let's just dive into it. So what we're going to need obviously is we're going to need a way to obviously get user input, and that's done through the scanner class in Java, which basically allows you to get user input from the command line in the terminal. So I'm getting an error here because we need to import, and and the scanner class is in util, so that's where we're going to import it from. And now we need some physical way, or some a storage place to kind of resemble our board. So what I did was I made a string. I made a 2D array of strings. Since our board is a 3x3, so we can make So a 2D array is like rows and columns, like each of the brackets. So the first bracket would be like row and the second bracket would be the column. And essentially what we get is something like this. So we're getting like this in a sense, like so 3x3. This is what we got from this board 2D array, and we're gonna like obviously initialize it in the constructor, but this is what we're gonna go for. So this is like the physical representation of our board. Then I'm gonna have two strings, and these are gonna be our players. So player 1 and then player 2. Player 2. Okay. Then we're gonna have an int, which is gonna be the amount of moves made, and this is gonna be important in determining if it was a tie, or if it's gonna be important, and it's gonna be basically important for determining if it was a tie or not. That's really the main purpose of this, and it's a cool thing so we could like output this out to see like how many moves you won in, something like that. But I'm not gonna do that, but if you want to, you can go ahead. And then we're gonna have two variables, rows and columns, and this is just gonna be easy, so we don't have to like constantly say like the length of the board and like constantly recall to that. We can just use these variables, so that's the point of that. So let's initialize. So I'm going to initialize the scanner first. So I'm basically creating a scanner instance here, and the parameter that is in the constructor for the scanner is like the input stream. So we're going to say system.in, and this is going to allow us to basically get like input from the terminal or the CMD for Windows. Then we're going to initialize our 2D array, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a 2D array, obviously, right? But I'm going to pass in 3 and 3 because our tic-tac board is a 3x3, and this is like the amount of rows and the amount of columns. And player 1 here, I'm just going to set it to the O, so it's going to basically hold the piece that the player has, or the player is putting down. Player 2 is going to be X. I'm just going to go with the common ones, and the moves made we're obviously going to initialize to 0 because at the start there are no moves made, right? And then rows, as I said, we'll just do 3, and then columns 3. In fact, probably better is to just do this. We could just do the board dot length, like the rows, and then to access like each of the inner an inner row or inner columns, we would do this, or we could do, if we were in a for loop, we'll do I, but here we can just do this, and this basically is just saying, since a 2D array is basically an array of arrays, what we're basically saying here is, in fact, let me just keep this for the rest of the time so I don't have to delete and then rewrite it. What this is basically saying is, okay, why did I do that? Anyways, what this is basically saying is that, so it's basically going into a column and then it's checking like, so this would be like one array and another array and another array, and inside there's 3 arrays, so that's like what a 2D array is, and it's basically saying go into the first column and then give me the length, so this column, so that would be 3. So, or we could just set it to 3, 3, but this is also fine. This will also give us the same stuff. Now, in the main method, let's obviously create an instance of this class, so Tic-Tac-Toe, and I'm just going to say TTT, and then new Tic-Tac-Toe. Now all we're going to do is we're going to call the run method, because this is going to be like where all the stuff, basically the main game is going to run through this method. So I'm going to do this for some clean like output on the terminal. So what I'm going to do is 2/n, so it's not like right up to the terminal call that we just in the terminal. So we're going to get two lines there. Then we're going to do our string input, or the person basically that's going to input is, and I'm going to set it to player 1 at default. You could set it to player 2 as well, but I'm going to set the O to start out first. And then I'm going to do string play again status, and this is basically going to be like the yes or no. So it's going to be like, it's going to check if the person wants to play again, and don't worry about this right now. It's going to make more sense at the end when we start doing the play again part. But right now, this is all it's doing is it's going to say, like, it's going to hold a yes or a no. That's all you need to know. Then a boolean endgame, and this is going to be basically the boolean that we're going to use to run our game. So if it's false, obviously we don't want to end the game, but if it's true, that means end the game, and basically end the program. And then here, before we go into the game loop, which I'm going to do through a do while loop, I'm just going to set up the board right away. So this is basically going to print the board out, and we'll do that next actually, but we'll call this method right there. And then we'll do a do while loop, and basically this is going to allow us to do specific tasks while like a certain thing is true. So here I'm going to say until the game is not ended. So right now it'll go in, it'll work for a while until we say end game is true, and then it's gonna say, okay, so then now we can get out of the program. That's when end game is true. Alright, so now, in fact, let's just start off with making the setup board. And all this method really does is just, it basically sort of initializes each like place in our board. So what I'm trying to say is here, so we'll go board.length here. Or actually, in fact, that's why we had rows, so we'll do that instead. And all we're gonna do is we're gonna give every space in the 2D array as an empty space. So it's just gonna be an empty string. So as you'll see right now, so I'm just gonna say I and j, and all I'm gonna say is it's gonna be an empty string. So that's all we really want, or actually a space, empty space. That's all we really want. And here I'm just gonna print out, like, just for aestheticness, I guess. I'm just gonna say welcome to Tic-Tac-Toe, right? Just so it looks professional, I guess, right? So that's pretty much the setup board. All we're doing is just initializing we're giving each box or square on the board empty space. That's all we're trying to do. Alright, so next thing we're gonna do is, so we're gonna get started with, we should probably get started with the display updated board. So this is also a pretty simple method. It's like it's very similar to setup board, except we're gonna set it to like input, so you'll see what I'm trying to say here. So I'm gonna give another print line so it looks neat, and then all this does is it pretty much does the exact same thing as the other. So I'm gonna have the same double for loops here, nested for loops, I mean, and then same thing here, and all we're gonna do here is alright, so all we're gonna do here is we're gonna print out the information in each board like space. So all I'm gonna do is this, and for purposes of what we already had, I'm gonna do this as well, so it looks very similar to the drawing we made up here, like this. It looks very similar to that. So that's what we're doing here, and that's realistically it. And we just want to add a slash line, like another line here. So then every every row after every after every column or row, it'll go on to the next line. It won't like be all in like one, pretty much like one line. That's not what we want. So that's what this is doing. And at the end we'll give another line just for making it neat, just to make it neat. Alright, so that's pretty much display updated board. So now we want to call that. So what this is going to do is that every time the game has not ended, it'll display an updated board. So it'll keep updating. So that's really what we want. So it's going to keep updating the board for us. Then we want to basically then we want to call make move, and then we want to pass in our input. And our input is what we had here. So basically we're telling this make move method that, okay, so the input right now is the circle, for example player 1, or if it's the X, and we want to put that basic string into one of these cells, I guess you could think of it as that. So you want to put it in one of these cells. So in fact, now I think we should do the make move. So what it's going to do is going to check if that's a valid move. Like it's going to ask the user first of all for an input, and it's going to check if that input is valid. So if there's not anything there already, or like it's not out of the range, like you can't say I want to put something on row 5 because there is no row 5. So we're going to check that as well. So that's like the main point of the make move method. So make move is what it's going to do is we're going to have another boolean here, and we're going to say move made. So basically means that, okay, that move was successful and it wasn't like bad or anything, right? So we're going to start it out as false. We're going to assume that it's not like proper. Again, we're going to do a do while here, so we're going to keep asking until the user gives us right input, proper input. And first things first, we want to give a message to the user. So we want to say, so player with, and I'm going to do slash tick mark here, and I'm doing this because you could also just do this, but I think this makes it look neat and it just makes it more readable. And all this is doing is putting like single quotes around the letter of the user. So like I'm just gonna put turn there, right? Oh, oops. Actually no, move. Sorry, move. And I'm gonna do the same thing here, right? And it just puts a single quote, so it's gonna look like this pretty much. So that's what we want there. I'm just gonna put the semicolon for now. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna say enter our row number, and we're gonna give 1, 2, or 3. That's what we want. That's how many rows that we can actually have. And here, I forgot to initialize, and we want a player row. So this is what we're gonna get from the user, and a player column. So that's like, these are our user inputs, and then we're just gonna initialize both of them to 0, and that's good. So, and let me just close it out with the while here. And the while loop, do while here actually has a semicolon at the end, so you want to remember that. And we're gonna keep doing this until like move made is true. So unless if it's false, we're gonna keep asking. But if it's true, then we don't want to do this. That means we got proper input from the user. And here we're gonna do player row, and this is where we're gonna use the scanner. So the scanner instance, and then there are a lot of methods here, and I want an integer. So I want something from 1, 2, or 3. So I'm gonna do next int, and this is gonna ask the user to give me an integer. And here we could also try catch this. So like let's say they input something random, like a string or something. We could try catch that, but I'm not doing it here. But we could do it later. And then I'm going to copy this exact line again. I'm going to paste it here, but all this is going to do is ask column number instead. And here we're going to do player column, and we're going to do the exact same thing. So next int, because we want another integer. Alright, now we need to do some checking here. So we want to make sure this row is between 1 and 3, and same thing with the column. So what we're going to do is we're going to check if player row is greater than or equal to 1, right? Because we want it to be between 1 and 3, and if it's less than or equal to the rows. So that actually takes care of it. Like, so we know now it has to be between 1 or 3, and we'll do the same thing for the column. So in fact, I can just copy this in fact, and what we're gonna do is we're just gonna change this to columns, right? And then the same thing here, player column, and if it's less than the columns, that's what we want. And last thing we want to check is we don't want to take in user input if there's already something there on that cell. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna check if player at the board and the cell player row -1, and I'll explain in a moment why player row -1, and player column -1, and we're gonna check if that is equal to empty. So if it's just an empty, and that's why here when we initialized or we set up our board, we gave an empty space. So that means if it's ever this, that means it's empty. So that means you can actually put something there. We don't want something that's not empty, and we don't want like to write over it. We don't want to like let's say the dude had like a circle, and like let's say there was an O here, and then X-axis to put an X-axis to like put in here. We don't want that, right? We don't want to have randomly people putting stuff in. And you might also have another question of why we have an empty space, why we're initializing it to that, and that's because all these characters are going to take up that amount of space, so it just looks better when we insert the 0 or the X. It's just going to look better. So that's the whole point of that. So that's what we want, right? So we're going to do, again to recap, if player row is greater than 1, less than the rows, same thing with the columns, and we're going to check if it's empty. So that's how we're doing. And here, why we're doing player row -1 is because array indices go from 0 to a certain number. They don't go from 1 to a certain number. So if we gave just the player row and player column, if the person entered 3, then we'd get an error of the array index out of bounds, and that's not right. So we want to do player row -1. And if that is the case, if all of this is true, then what we want to do is we want to do that player row -1 and the player column -1, and we want to make it our move, so like the circle or the X. Else, that means, okay, they entered something random or something wrong, we're just going to say invalid input. So we're going to do another line to just make it more neat, and we're going to say invalid input, right? And then we're going to say please try again, and we're going to keep asking because we're never making this false. So we're never making move true or move made true. So it's going to keep asking. And in fact, that's one of the things we're missing here. We need to make move made to true. That means that move was successful and we can go ahead. We can take that move. So that is our make move method. That's all we need to do there. Then we're going to go back here and we're going to basically look at it and we're going to say, okay, so our make move method works now. Now we need to change the turn. So after a move is made, we need to change the turn. So that's why we're going to change our input, and that's why we have this method called change turns. And we're just going to do that, right? So what this change turns method does, it's just basically going to check if the turn is like player 1, then we're going to change it to player 2. If the turn is player 2, then vice versa, right? So that's pretty much what we're going to do. So what this method is going to do is we're going to check if turn is equal to player 1. Now right away you might be thinking, okay, this doesn't look right. Like this shouldn't be right because the strings, you definitely don't want to use equal, right? But here actually, since we've made player 1 input 2, so actually player 1 points to this place, so they're in the same memory location, so this would actually work here. So then we can just say, if that means we're basically saying if our player 2, if the turn is player 1, now we just want the turn to be the player 2, not player 1 to be player 2. We want the turn to be player 2. Otherwise, we want to just make turn player 1. So that basically, the else will only happen if the turn is of player 2. And then we're just going to return the turn. So that means here we successfully changed the turn. So it'll change turns here. So we'll change between player 1 and player 2 all the time. So then we have a new input here. Alright, so far so good. So we have the basics of the game, right? We have the turns changing and all of that. Now we need to, obviously, now since we know our turn has been made, we're just going to increase the moves made. Now we need to check if someone is winning the game, or if it's a tie. So we should now do the winner method. Now the winner method is it's not too complicated, but it is definitely more complicated than the other methods. And I'm going to write out some pseudocode kind of here, and I'm going to explain what I mean here. Columns and check that. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a step-by-step process where we're going to check all the rows in the 2D array and check if they have the same like type. So if they have the same piece, or they have, so if they have the same piece, like all all circles or all X's, we're going to do the same thing for the columns, and we're going to do the same thing for diagonals. Now, the thing about the diagonals is it might seem really hard. It might seem hard at first, but if you think about it, a diagonal can only occur if it passes through the center. So we really have two cases to check here. We don't have to check every single case. So this one's actually very simple. Now for rows and columns, what we're going to do is we're going to do the same 2D array stuff, except we're only going to do one for loop, not two nested for loops, because what we're going to do is we're going to keep the columns constant. So we're going to keep the rows not constant. So the columns are going to be constant. So what I mean by that is we're going to check if board at I and board at 0. So this is going to change. I is going to change in the board at 0, or the columns is going to be between 0 and 3, and we're always going to change that, but I is the only one changing for us. 0, 1 to 1 to 2 are never changing for us. We're just checking. So what this is essentially doing is it's going to every row and it's going to check the one at 0 index, 1 index, 2 index, because we are going to keep these 0, 1, 2 indexes constant. But the for loop is going to change the rows for us, so we're going to check every row like this. So that's how that works. So we're going to check if it's equal to the piece at I and 1. So we're checking the next square pretty much. And then I'm going to put parentheses around these just to make it more clear here. And then we're going to do another check for if, I'm going to copy this because we're just going to have to change the values. So we're going to do another check to see if board at the piece at the one cell, or the one index, is equal to the second. And we're also just going to do a last check for if the 0 at the index 0 is equal to the piece at the second index. So this essentially assures us that we'll check for every single square and we'll check if it's ever equal. And if they're all equal, then we know that the winner has to be the piece at any of these squares. So we could return any of these pieces because we're returning a string, so we're just going to return the thing in that place. So it's going to be an X or a no. So I'm just going to return the first one. So there. So that means here we can check. I think I'm missing a parentheses, or maybe not. Maybe two. Okay, I was missing a lot of parentheses. Anyways, this allows us to check the rows. So what we're essentially doing is we're checking each row. So let's assume this was like a row. So we're checking this row first. So we're checking if this is equal to this, and if this is equal to this, and if this index is equal to this index, that means, okay, they're all the same. So that means this must be a win for whatever piece is in here. So we're just going to return the first one. Or we could even return this, but it doesn't really matter. We just want to return one of those because that we know they're all the same piece. Alright, we're going to do the exact, almost very exact same thing for columns. And I'm just going to copy paste that. We're going to change it to columns here. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to flip it. So we're going to have the 0, 1, 2, 3 on the rows. And we're going to have the I variable at the columns value. So that's what we want to do. We just want to flip everything. So that's essentially what I'm doing here. I'm just flipping everything. So what this now does, logically speaking, it basically does this. So it goes to every column. So it's checking column by column, and it checks if this index is equal to this index, and if that index, and then if this index is equal to this index, and if that index is equal to this. So that essentially is assuring us that, okay, if that is true, then all of these are the same piece, and then we can return the first one. So essentially we're going to return the first one here. And that's essentially it for the column. So that's columns and rows. Now here's the diagonal. So as I said before, we only need to check two cases. So what we're going to check is, we're going to check if the board at 0, 0 equals, and let me write this out and it'll make more sense actually, at 1, 1, and we're going to check here with essentially the same thing again. So let me just write this out, and I think I can explain it better there. And so, alright, and then last one. So what we essentially just wrote here is this. So we want to check if board at 0, 0, 1, 1 is, if they're equal, 1, 1 and 2, 2 are equal, and 0, 0 and 2, 2 are equal. What I'm basically saying here is I'm going to check if board at 0, 0, so this index, is equal to board. In fact, let me write out the numbers, and it might make more sense that way, I think. So 1 here and 2, and same thing here. So 0, 1, and 2. Alright, so what I'm saying is I want to check a cell at 0, 0, so 0, 0. If it's equal to cell at 1, 1, and is equal to cell at 2, 2, which is the diagonal, that means we know that it must be a winning combination because they're all the same piece. So that's what I'm doing there, and we're going to do the exact same thing for the other diagonal. So we're going to check if cell at 0, 2 is equal to cell at 1, 1, and if it's equal to cell at 2, 0. And if we're doing that, that means we know this diagonal is working as well because they're all the same piece. So that's what we're going to do here. So that one last, in fact, before we do that, we want to here return any of these indices or any of the values in these indices. So I'm just going to return 0, 0. But you could also return 1, 1 or 2, 2 because they're all going to be the same if this if statement is true. Another one we're going to just have, as I said again, it'll be board. In fact, I'm just going to copy this and change it around. So as I said, board 0, 2 if it's equal to 1, 1. And then we're going to check if 1, 1 here is equal to, if it's equal to 2, 0, but I said, why did I delete that? 2, 0, like I said. And then last one we're going to check is if board at 0, 2 is equal to board at 2, 0. So that's essentially checking the entire diagonal for us. So like I said here, just to recap up here, this entire thing is being, so we're getting the entire thing here. So what we're basically getting is, so here, this is what we're getting. So I'm saying cell at 0, 2. If it's equal to cell at 1, 1 and cell at 2, 2, that means we know the diagonal is there. So that's what basically, essentially what we wrote here. So if it's equal to 0, 2 is equal to 1, 1, 1, 1 is equal to 2, 0, and 0, 2 is equal to 2, 0, that means we know that the diagonal is a successful diagonal, and that means we can go on. So we can just return the first one, or whichever one we really want to return, because they're all the same if this if statement is true. But I'm just gonna return the first one. So our when method is basically done. Last thing we want to make sure is here I have this last return statement, and that is because if there is no winner, that means we just want to return an empty square. So we want to return an empty cell. And I'm doing that again, as you'll see later. It's gonna help when we do the ask to play again, and if it's a tie, this is gonna help here. That means there's no winner. So alright, so now we know that there's a winner. So our winner method will work. So we should probably now check to see if there's a winner. So how do we do that? So what we're going to do is we're going to check here. We're going to have an if statement. I'm going to say if this is going to check if it's a tie. We're going to first check if it's a tie. So that means the moves made are 9, because there's only 9 cells. So that means that if there's 9 moves made, that means all the cells are full. And we're going to check if when we call the winner method, the winner method, if that is equal to an empty space, that means we know that this is a tie. There's no winner here. So I'm just going to display the updated board here again, just one last time, and then I'm going to print out tie, because we know that we got a tie here. So we're going to print out tie, because that's a tie, right? And here, this is where our play again status comes into play. So this is where we're going to ask the user if you want to play again, and we're going to call this method, which is called ask to play, and we haven't implemented it yet, but we'll do that next. And this is where we'll ask for the player status. And now we're going to have an else, and this else is else if here. And this else is basically going to be the case where there is a winner. So we're going to check if the moves made is less than or equal to 9. So it can be 9 or it can be less than or equal to. That's fine with us. And we're going to check if the winner is not equal to this empty space, right? So that if it's not equal to this empty space, then we know that we have a winner. So if we're going to again display the updated board one last time, and we're going to print out the winner, because we got it from the, if we call winner, we get the winner back. That's how we implemented our method. So we're going to do the winner of this game is, and again I'm going to do the slash single quotes thing for making it cleaner and easy to read. And I'm going to call the winner method because it returns a string. And all we got to do is just do another quote and end it there. And that's it. That's all we have to do. So we got the winner. And again, we're going to ask for a play again. So exact same call. So play again status. We're going to call ask to play again if the user wants to play again, obviously. And here I'm going to write this these two if statements as I said before. So as I said before, play again is going to be either yes or no. So anyway, so we're going to do equals ignore case. We're going to check if the string is equal to yes or no. And why I'm doing equals ignore case is if the user enters like lowercase y, uppercase e, and like lowercase s, that's still a yes. It's not like it's not a yes. So we want to make sure our case doesn't matter here. And first let's check for no. Checking for no is pretty simple, because we know if it's no, that means they don't want to play, so we can make endgame true, which then will break out of this do while loop, and then the program will end. Else if the user enters equals ignore case yes, that means okay, they want to play again, then we need to reset everything. So what I mean by everything is, again, we're going to reset this play again status to just an empty string, right? We're going to set up the board again, which is essentially clearing our board for us. We're going to change the moves made to 0, and then we're going to make our input back to player 1. So again, we're going to restart the game with player 1 starting again. And this loop's going to continue all over again, because endgame has never been true. So that is essentially the run method done. All we need to do is finish this ask to play method again, and our game is pretty much done for the command line. So Well, what this method, all this method's really gonna do is it's just gonna ask the user. So I have this string here called status call, and this is basically gonna ask. It's gonna be what the user enters. So it's gonna either be yes or no, right? I'm gonna keep asking until they enter yes or no, and we're just gonna return this status call back. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have a while loop here, and you'll see why. I'm gonna check if status call is equals ignore case. Oops, not that. Equals ignore case yes. So yes. Or if it's like equals ignore case no, we're also fine with that. Right? If it's no. And we want to make sure that our like the status call or like whatever the user enters is like not equal to the initial value. And we were doing this so we don't return like a random thing. And what this while loop is basically doing is it's essentially making the user have to input a yes or a no. And you'll see that they can't just enter any random random thing because we're not going to allow it. If you're not entering something proper, we're not going to allow you to go on. So you're going to have to enter yes or a no. And all this is going to do in this while loop is we're just going to print out the statements. So we're going to say /n just to make it neat, and we're just going to ask, would you like to play again? And we're going to clearly say that we want a yes or no answer, right? And then we're going to give space. So that's where they're going to enter that. And then we're going to make our status call equal to kb. And here, there's two methods to get strings. There's called next line and next. And we just want a word. So I'm just going to get the next. I don't want the entire line. So kb.next. And then there we go. So that's essentially our ask again to play method, right? So that's essentially it. So we have everything here, and lastly, as the game ends, we're just gonna give some happy response back to the user that played, and we're just gonna say, thanks for playing the game, right? Just to be kind, thanks for playing, right? And then we're just gonna say hope to see you soon, and ... just why not? And then we're gonna end off with the 3 lines that we had. So just like from the start where we had the 3 lines, we're gonna do the same thing here. In fact, just print, and oops, I think I forgot a /n here. So 3, and that is it. Alright, so before we go ahead and test this out, I just want to clear a few things out. So I made a small mistake here in the winner method where so here I made it to 0, and I made that I just make sure you flip all of these, so everything should be flipped, and that's because of the logic that I already presented before. And let's just make sure we have prints everywhere. So like here for print, we should have a print, not a print line, because that's just gonna make our board look weird. We want to print everything out and then get a print line out, or /n, new line. Otherwise, for now, this looks pretty good. So let's go check in the terminal. So we open up a new terminal, and we're gonna call. Obviously, you're going to run this class. Here we go. So we got welcome to Tic-Tac-Toe, player with enter a number to 1 2 3, and then we get the board here. So let's say player entered 2 2, and as you can see, row 2, column 2, and you get that basic piece in there. And as I said before, we wanted to add empty spaces so it looks proper here and it doesn't look like janky and the board isn't messed up after you enter something in. And again, if I do 2 again, it's going to say invalid input because obviously there's something there. So that's what we did in the make move method. We checked if it's empty or not. Let's say x enters 1 1, so x goes here, and let's say circle goes row 1 column 2. So row 1 column 2. Obviously we put it there. And let's say x doesn't know what he's doing, so he's going to go row 1 column not 2 again, because you can see row 1 column 3. So let's go, he went here, and we're going to put a circle here to win. So row 3 column 2. So there we go, and it's saying the winner of this game is row because obviously he got 3 in a row. Now we're getting asked, do you want to play again? If we say no, obviously thanks for playing, and it'll get out. If we play again, let me try to get a tie here. So I'm just gonna enter random stuff here. So let's see. So something like 2 1. Then we're just gonna say 2 3. stop that. X will go there, so we'll do 1, 3. Then we'll do circle go here, so alright, so I got the tie here, so there, then 1, 2, and then we'll get 3, 2. So actually circle 1, I'm not seeing things. Anyways, circle 1 here, and if I say yes, I'm gonna get a tie just to show an example. And so 3, 2 and 3, 1. Then we're gonna do again 1, 3. Then we're just gonna put 1. We're just gonna put, yeah, we're gonna do 2, 1. Then we're, oh, it was circles turn. Okay, yeah. Alright, I can't get a tie for some reason. Okay, so let me get a tie actually. Alright, so again we got that. Play again. So as you can see, it's working. It's clearly working for us, so you can have fun with this. Next we're gonna make a GUI of this, so that's like part 2. So we're gonna take all of this logic and put it in a GUI. And again, I wanted to test this out. So we enter a row 4 and like out of something, we're just gonna say invalid input for us. That's a good thing. Now we're gonna do something like that. Then 2, 1. And then I'm gonna put, okay, I'm gonna get a tie. I'm trying to get a tie so I can show the example here. So something like that. Like that. Alright, so we should get a tie here, I think. So, oops, 1, 2. And then tie will be 2. So it's, as you can see, it says, okay, tie, because now there's no winning combination here. And obviously I could say no, or I could say like no like this, and it would do that. And if we entered something random, in fact, probably should show that. I'm just going to do some random stuff to explain how that works. Invalid input, like we should get. Again, something's there, so we don't want that. That's good. And let's say circle didn't know what he was doing, so he said 3, 3, and then 3, 1, so wins. And now if you enter some random stuff, it won't let you go by it because I want you to enter yes or no. So that's it. That is the tic-tac-toe through the command line. I hope you enjoyed. So part 2 is we're gonna take this logic and we're gonna make a GUI out of it, so we can have 2 people playing. So by clicking a board, and then later we're gonna implement an AI, so where a computer will make a move and you'll make a move, and we'll see who wins there. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know in the comment section below if you want to see more videos like this, or if you have any other ideas. And hope you have a good rest of your day. Thanks for watching. Hope you like the video, subscribe, and see you later.